Hi, Peter Charles here, Focus for Life Fly Fishing. And today I thought I'd do something a little different. I have a number of videos currently on YouTube that deal with the design of streamers and wet flies. And more specifically, how to get them to ride correctly and how to get them to penetrate and hold their position in current. And I thought perhaps it'd be a good idea to consolidate them into one video. Now, I don't mean adding them all into one great big long video and everybody would get bored watching it, but rather I'd reference them. And then you could watch the ones that are important to you. I'd like to start off by talking about downforce flies. Now, the name might suggest to you that I'm using some sort of gimmick like a lip or something on the front. I'm not. Downforce fly can be characterized by three things. It has an up-eye hook. The wing is flat along the hook shank, or as flat as you can get it, and the construction is quite sparse. So we can use that kind of construction in most streamers and wet flies. So for example, if we're looking at my fall favorite fly that I tied for a video a little while back, it has a classic construction with a small head and a wing that's sort of cocked up at an angle. I also tied the Blue Doctor, which is another traditional pattern, and on this one I tied a larger head and the wing is flatter along the hook shank. So you can see one is traditionally tied and one is sort of tied in my downforce fly pattern with that flattened wing. So you can apply it to a variety of traditional patterns. I mean, you could do a Mickey fin this way if you wanted to, as an example. In my particular video on downforce flies, I am using my black-nosed ace Weimer pattern to show how this fly is put together. And the whole idea behind the downforce fly is it's a fly that will get down on its own. It doesn't have to be dragged down by a sink tip. And once it's down, it will stay there. It doesn't tend to come back up. I mean, the downforce on it is very slight, but it's enough to keep it from lifting. Now, one of the interesting things I discovered with this style of fly tying was that if I was to use just a floater on a long fluorocarbon leader, I could cast that out, and if I didn't cast with a lot of energy, the fly would run out of gas before it completely straightened the leader out. It would drop and sink without any resistance from the fly line. And once it came under tension in the current, let's say if it sunk 2 or 3 feet, it would stay there. And I know that because I'd hang up. So you can imagine in 3 foot of water with a modest flow that you're hanging up on bottom with no sink tip, just a long leader. So I knew it was working, just the fact I was hitting bottom with it as I swung the fly around. And it would stay there. And I could tell if I rolled it out dead straight, it wouldn't touch bottom. If I rolled it out and let it sink, it could go 2/3 the way through the arc and it would hit bottom. So it meant that throughout the arc, it was staying down. Whatever depth it gained on the initial rollout, it would keep that depth as it went around. I've had other people who've tried this style of fly and they've written me and saying, yeah, it works for me too. You know, I've had the same experience. So the whole point of this fly is it gets down on its own, and once it's down, it tends to stay there. Now, this brings up a really intriguing little thing. We're conditioned to have these little itty-bitty short, stiff leaders on the end of our sink tips, right? If you read the literature from out west, it's all about 2 foot, 3 foot, thereabouts. And a lot of guys say, oh, I catch lots of fish with it. Yeah, and that's fine, I know they do. But if you have a fly that gets down on its own and will stay down, you can have a 10-foot leader on the end of it. Now imagine what that does. That fly is now just lazily kicking in current on the end of that long leader. It doesn't have that tethered look, like it's pinned the end of your sink tip. It'll move around. Also, there's a great deal of distance between your sink tip and the fly, which means there's a lot of distance between your sink tip and the fish. If you're fishing in clear water, fish can be turned off if the sink tip is close to them. So if you've got that separation both vertically and horizontally, it's going to improve your presentation. And like I said before in the previous video, it's about an incremental approach. I'm gaining a little bit with everything I add. And so it doesn't mean every fish is going to be turned off by a sink tip this close, but some will. And I get a better shot of those fish that are a little bit more shy. Of course, the aggressive ones doesn't matter. They'll take your car keys on the end of an old rope. But, you know, the ones that are less aggressive, that's where a more subtle presentation is going to work. Now, along these lines, I've also produced 2 videos, one on having larger heads and using larger heads that will disturb water and also act as a strike trigger. And I also did a video that deals with buoyancy and drag. So if you have materials that have a lot of drag or a lot of buoyancy, how it negatively impacts your presentation. So if you group these 3 videos together, it gives you an idea how this whole type of fly tying actually works. And if you follow those 3 videos as a group, it's going to produce a type of fly for you that is going to be very, very fishable. And the other benefit to this style of fly, it's very easy to cast because the fly is slick and comes out of the water quite easily. So if you're spey casting and you're used to casting high drag flies, and especially if you had to add weight to get them down, then you're used to having to use heavy lines and heavy tips and blah, 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 blah. I mean, it's a brute force approach. I mean, I have cast these flies, great big, like a streamer, almost 4 inches long, and I've been spey casting with a 9-foot 4-weight trout rod. So, I mean, they're that slick. You can use light tackle to cast them. You don't need heavy rig to get it moving. The other 2 I'll mention deals with tube flies, and one is about having our tube flies ride level. So in other words, they come through the water like this instead of the butt end sagging because of the weight of the hook. And the other one is to have the flies ride level instead of tipping over. It's less of an issue when you're tying flies on a hook versus a tube, but there are some principles in those 2 videos which also apply to flies tied on hooks. So they might be worth watching, especially if you're interested in tube flies. So if we put all of these videos together, it gives you a sort of a better appreciation of the hydrodynamic forces that are working on flies. And again, like I said in the previous video, I mean, those effects can be small, but in terms of the fly is small also. So they can actually have a significant effect over the course of a day's worth of fishing. And it's also fun to be able to fish a little differently than everybody else. When everybody else is slugging a heavy tip, and you're out there with a light rig and you're getting down as deep as they are, it is kind of cool. So give these videos a check out, and also take a look in my comment section. I'll be putting the information up in the cards. That direction. Up in the cards. I'll also put links in the description of the video that will have connections to other videos on flies that I've tied in this fashion. So give it a try. Downforce flies, and keep in mind all the things we talked about in previous videos to make these flies really work. And yeah, they really do work. They get down, they stay down, and they catch fish. Cheers.